Okay, welcome to Introduction to Research. This is Unit 1. I would say Part 2. This is Unit 2 in the Myers textbook. This is covering Myers textbook, pages 19 to 26. The big topics that are going to be talked about here is understanding the goals of research. So why do we need research? Understanding the importance of research in terms of intuition, hindsight bias, and overconfidence. Understanding qualities of a good researcher, and then lastly, understand how researcher actually goes through the process of doing research. So let's look at the first one. First big idea here. Goals for conducting research. Big things that researchers try and do is they try and describe behavior. Maybe a behavior of a student. Okay? They try to explain the environment of what's going on. They try and predict the future. And then lastly, they try and control it. So maybe they start noticing that a lot of fights are going on in the hallway, and they're trying to understand why that's taking place, and maybe they notice it at a specific time period. So then they can try and control it, put some security guards in the hallway, and they try and predict when it's going to take place to help make a more safe environment. Psychologists definitely need something that impacts us. They need research because we have intuition within us. Many believe our intuition is kind of like our gut instinct. It's deep down inside us. It's our awareness. It's our internal guide. Research is important because we think about a situation, and sometimes we just go with our gut instinct. I'm a good teacher. I know I'm a good teacher. I'm just going to go with it, and I'm just going to believe I am and never trust my students. Okay? Intuition is impacted by overconfidence and hindsight bias. So it's the gut instinct that we have, and these two things kind of play into it. First one is hindsight bias. I knew it all along. Okay? The tendency to believe that after learning the outcome of something, you kind of just think, yeah, I knew that. Many people question, why the heck did they not clear the second Twin Tower in September 11th? Well, in hindsight bias, many people didn't know that we were under terrorist attack and that the second one was going to get hit. Okay? Many also think of a situation. I have a funny picture of a little man on there. It could also be a girl. I should put a girl on there as well to be bias free. But after maybe particularly a boyfriend breaks up with you, your friends turn to you and say, well, I knew he was bad, or I knew he was going to do that. Well, then why didn't you tell me? Hindsight bias. I didn't know that he was like that. But many kind of just say that they know that it was going to happen. In reality, they don't know. Another thing that we need to take a look at is overconfidence. I mean, many of you maybe are taking a look at your quiz today and you're like, yay, I got an A, I rocked it. And then when you get the quiz back, you're going to be like, wow, I really thought I knew that stuff. Okay, it is human tendency to be overconfident in our abilities. We use science to help gather and sift through the evidence that restrains us from our intuition. I would love to think I'm super overconfident. I'd love to think that all of you know the material, but sometimes I need to stop and check to make sure you're really on the same page as me. I'd love to be overconfident, be like, yeah, I know tests. But in reality, sometimes I need to kind of check to see where you guys are at. So what does a researcher need? A researcher does need to be curious. They need to have a passion for researching. Sometimes they need to be skeptic, though, and they really need to question whether things are true or not, and they need to ask for evidence. They need to be have humility. They need to be sometimes, oof, not the best teacher in the world. I need to be open for criticism. I need to be open for maybe I need to try this lesson or try this new way of doing something. So now that you kind of gather why research needs to be done, here's the steps, the components for psychological research, something you've probably seen before. It needs empirical investigation. It needs to be bias-free as best as possible, but you are dealing with humans, so sometimes bias is hard to avoid. Here's the steps. I would stop, maybe copy down the different steps, and then kind of listen to how I explain it. So the first one is you need to observe and you ask a question. I noticed that the majority of my students in the afternoon classes turn a lot better than my students in the morning classes. The time of day can cause students to perform better. Right? So I notice a behavior that draws me to specific research. I can develop a theory, an explanation, using integrated set of principles organizes observations to predict behavior. I developed that hypothesis, okay? A specific statement that attempts to explain how variables are related. Students in afternoon classes score higher than students in morning classes, or you could say students perform better in afternoon classes. So it's a little theory. You now are going to try and prove that is true. So number 3, you're going to test it, okay? Or you're going to use a method. The methods are underneath it: correlation, observation, surveys, tests, and experiments, which will be the second portion of my presentation, which you'll do over the weekend. But in order to do this, you have to have an operational definition. You have to have a precise set of procedures for how you're going to perform this research. I'm going to have 30 students here and 30 students there. I'm going to use this specific classroom. I'm going to use this specific test with these specific questions. So it can be replicated. So I know that replicate's in red down there. Procedures must be repeatable. Other sciences can use the exact same experiment to see whether or not afternoon really impacts whether or not a student can learn something. Like I said, it's a specific set of directions. I kind of think of it as the lesson plan. You're going to attack it the exact same way so you know that maybe it's fair across the board. You then are going to crunch the data. So once you get all the information back on the tests, okay, you had students take a test, then you're going to look at the data that you received back, and you could have qualitative data or quantitative data. Quantitative data is looking at numbers, the stats of it. Okay, 70% of the students got this question wrong, or 70% of the students failed the test. Okay, and you're making a bar graph and explaining it. Qualitative is more looking at what question did they get wrong. Everybody's getting psychoanalysis wrong. Everybody's getting cognitive wrong. Huh, you wouldn't get it wrong in the stats class. Overconfidence. Sorry. Okay, so the difference between quantitative and qualitative is the difference between what type of data are you getting back. So once you got your results, okay, it's either going to be true, and you're either going to share it, yay, or maybe you're going to have to modify it and make some changes. So here is the introduction to research. I would take a look at the book, kind of make sure that you have reviewed all the information for the beginning part of research. Make sure that you are able to understand the goals here. Why is research important? How does intuition, hindsight bias, and overconfidence impact us as individuals? Why do we need to do research? What are some good qualities of a researcher? Okay, and then lastly, make sure you know the process of the scientific method. Make sure you're able to understand, replicate, theory, hypothesis, and operational definition. Also, make sure you can explain the difference between quantitative and qualitative, because those are all testable questions. See you tomorrow in class. Have a good night.